Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Friday, January 26, 2018. Just stepping on real quick to do a little update, kind of take you around a little bit in our space weather section of our website, thegrandsolarminimum.com. Still in progress, but a lot has been taken care of. Lots of new features. A solar scope, we already went over that last time we were on live. Take a look at our space weather. Our solar wind speeds are around 450 kilometers per second with a density under right around 1, if not lower than that. So very light, in fact. Our KP indices, looking at our sun, we don't have any sunspots. This will be day number 6 in a row now without a sunspot. And I do believe that's 12 days in 2018 without a sunspot. Looking at the solar rate flux, everything else here looks pretty normal. Looking at our LASCO, there's Venus coming around the bend. And of course, SDO, taking a look to see if we have any coronal holes forming. And just the weak center of the planet right now, where we see the weak corona. So no major coronal holes to report on at this time. Everything looks pretty quiet. KP indices are low today. We have a little forecaster up here that actually goes through and tells us. And today the greatest observed was 3. That was our max. They expect levels to stay around 3 tomorrow on the 27th. And as we go ahead forward to the 28th, we're looking at a 2 to 1. So things are going to be quieting down. They don't expect any kind of geomagnetic storms to happen over the next several days. So we are in a minimum. It's going to be quiet. Let me go over here to windy.com, and I want to start doing this a little bit more instead of the typical GFS where we go out 2 weeks and try to make people aware of weather that's 2.5 weeks away. Instead, I think it's best that we concentrate on the forecasts that are best fine-tuned. And that being said, I've always said that I believe in looking at the weather forecast, not trusting out past 4 or 5 days. So with that being said, I've got a map here of windy.com, and you guys are probably wondering what these little cameras are. These are webcams for particular spots. Not all of them have it, obviously, but you get to click in on it. It'll show you their temperatures. Looks like pretty much the daily stats for the entire day and the prediction. Of course, the forecast, it's got wind speeds, wind gusts. So very new feature. I don't know how long it's been on here. I think this is an accident if it's been on here before.
I turned it on.
Did you?
It's a feature that you actually turn on.
Okay, so
sorry about that,
no, thanks to my producer, I'm now aware of a live look in at our weather situation. So that's kind of neat to look at. All right, so we'll go ahead and start off with Friday, which is right now, obviously. Pretty quiet. We see some light rain move through by Saturday into Sunday. And here's where we thought in the Northeast we would get some snow on the 29th. And as you guys can see, I mean, we got a system building up in the Central Plains here coming across the country. But there's rain on Monday, and we get a little bit of a cool down after that. And then we've got some more moisture coming on the 31st. See if I can get that to define. Ah, that's better. Let's start back because I could barely tell what was rain and what was snow. Considering the action that we've seen this winter so far, this is not as bad as it has been. We see a little storm system move off on the 27th off the East Coast. But what I really want to focus in, folks, is this area up here in Washington and Oregon, the very tip of the northwest of the United States. If you guys pay attention to this radar loop, there is non-stop moisture being forecasted in the northwest part of our country, and it's not going to stop. So they are really into their rainy season. Now, I know it rains a lot out there, but I just wanted to point that out. And thankfully, we don't see a lot of rain from Northern California or the middle of California either. So far, so good, but that could change. But this going all the way to February 3rd, I mean, for the most part, from what we've been used to this year, and right here on the 4th is where we start to see our first big storm with this Arctic push. Okay, we got rain off into the Atlantic off the East Coast here, South Carolina and Georgia. But as you see, we've got a big band of snow forming across the northern plains into the Midwest, into the Great Lakes, and this is predicted to move into the northeast part of the United States. Now, actually, some of the suggested forecasts on the GFS has this system in the southeast combined with this system up here in the Midwest and form a pretty big storm. I'll look at our temperatures real quick before we move on. And actually, there is one thing I do want to point out on GFS, which I'll go straight to there here after I'm done with this. Taking a look at our temperatures across the country right now, this is pretty nice for us. We've had cold everywhere, and places like Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, they're starting to feel like normal weather right now in the 30s and 40s. But as we get into Saturday, we see that mild air tries to hang on, and then right as we start getting into Sunday, we start to see a bit of a cooling trend, and it fights its way down. By Sunday, Monday morning, we're back to half of the country at freezing again. This Arctic air, you guys see it all bottled up here in Canada, Ontario, Winnipeg. It's hanging out. That cold line gets pushed farther south, and then by the 30th, this is where it gets interesting. The GFS shows this too. Actually, this is the GFS. I meant the ECMWF shows this as well. They're suggesting by the late January, another temperature rise in the 40s before it gets cold again. In fact, now we're expecting the Arctic air to come after the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of February, which right now we're on the 3rd. As you see, that cold air trying to make its way south. And, you know, the GFS is really suggesting that it's going to be quite a struggle on the 3rd and 4th to get that cold air that they've been predicting for many weeks now. As you see in Canada, all that Arctic air, that below 20-degree stuff is still bottled up north. Thus far, leaving the eastern and Midwest and the northern plains as normal winter conditions. So if anything, I'm a little bit relieved that some of this, it almost appears to me as if they are backing off a little bit on some of the weather that we were scheduled to have, especially the snow. I want to take a look real quick at the GFS. This is important here on the tropical tidbits. Something I watched the other night, and as I'm zooming through here, take a look at the northwest. As I said earlier, you see the precipitation just constantly flowing in. But something really weird I've never seen before, and I guess I don't pay attention that much. But right here on the 3rd of February, take a look at Canada here. Look at how these lines are almost right on top of each other. Sorry about that. And again, here in the Northeast too, as the 3rd of February, we get a big snowstorm system. This looks like a monster right here. But the lines are tight here, but not as tight as they are up in Canada. And yesterday they were showing this pressure bar as being really tight throughout the United States. And here you see it on the 4th of February. And again, the GFS is lightening up. We're looking at the plains right now, Nebraska, Kansas, Utah, Idaho, Montana. These lines were a lot closer together. So I'm really glad to see that forecast kind of backing off. But then again, as you move into the 5th, we start to see that development again of those tight lines forming right here in the far northwest of our country. So I'm interested to see, and of course that's a big system that's forming over the 6th. So this is the interesting part. February 6th, they've got rain in the forecast here for western New York, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, most of the southeast. And here's that storm pressure system that we were talking about. Now it's starting to get its act together here in the northwest, and it's making its way across the United States. But again, look at these lines. Look how close they are. That's just going to signify this is going to be very, very gusty winds in this storm. These are going to be blizzard-like conditions, no doubt. But what I'm kind of struck by is that for several weeks now, we've been predicting this Arctic front to push down and bring us cold airs below, or cold temperatures below average for the next several days. In fact, some are saying into mid-March. But the latest GFS has the precipitation anyway. I mean, we're in Wednesday, and it's warm enough to still be raining. Move into Thursday morning. Now this thing turns into a major winter storm, and by Thursday midday, we start to see the change of snow to rain in the northeast and Ohio, and all that rain is going to be in the south, where it should be. The storm moves out of here by the 9th. By the 10th, we are quiet. And this might be, honestly, the kind of winter that we've had this year so far. I know just up here in the northeast, to see this. Now, this is a long time out. We still got a couple weeks away from this date. But I watched this model a lot, and 2 days ago, just 2 days ago, we were having snowstorm after snowstorm after snowstorm. Now, some of these models are suggesting that we might have a slight warm-up in the middle of this Arctic front that's supposed to be coming down. This month is predicted to be one of the worst of the winter for most of the country, and especially us up here in the Northeast as well. But I'm going to go ahead and run the temperatures, even though I just wanted to show you the difference between the windy and the GFS on tropical tidbits. But they suggest here January 30th, temperatures are in the 20s. By the 1st, we're creeping back into the mid-30s and almost touching 40 before the 3rd. We get that Arctic air pushing down. So we'll keep our eyes. Here's that warm-up that we weren't expecting. According to the GFS on tropical tidbits, we could see temperatures in north or western New York at 53 degrees, 56 in Cleveland, mid-60s and upper 60s in the south. Get a little bit normal. But then we see those negative temperatures across Montana, Minnesota, Idaho, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota. You guys will get that Arctic blast for sure. But the difference in this pattern here is what we were seeing was a ridge that was starting up here in the northwest corner and moving down like a roller coaster, okay? Now we're not seeing that. The front has changed a little bit, and it's protecting the East Coast from what we originally thought was going to be by the 8th, the 9th, and 10th of February. We thought for sure we were going to be in some deep cold up here in the Northeast. And, of course, as I move forward, by the 9th, we're looking at temperatures in the 20s and teens. And as we get to the 12th, again, half the country is having normal winter temperatures, but the Northeast does look like it's going to be a little frigid toward the end of that week. So, again, still a lot to look for, and a lot can change between now and then. But the reason why I did use the windy.com instead of the tropical tidbits is because they give, I think, a 6-7 day outlook, and that's a little bit more accurate than trying to give someone a 2-3 week outlook on the weather. Since we're on the weather, I wanted to talk about China real quick. They are experiencing some extreme cold right now as well as we speak. Temperatures there, they're on a yellow storm warning over there as of January 24th. That was a second on their 4-tier weather warning system. They were expecting, for them, they don't get this kind of snow, so 4 inches of snow is a lot for them. But this is severe cold for them over there in China. Blizzard conditions in some areas are expected to last more than 3 days. New snow falling up to 20 centimeters. Again, 8 inches, but this region doesn't get this kind of snow. So for them to file a level 2 warning, that's a big deal for them as well. And I did want to take a quick look as well at the volcano situation. Mari has done a wonderful job on producing our videos, and she has been taking a lot of personal interest in the volcano and earthquake section. It's something that we hadn't covered for a while. Actually, the only thing that we really talked about volcanoes and earthquakes was when we had John Casey on. So ever since we haven't had him on our show, we've kind of gotten away from doing the volcanoes and earthquakes because of the weather. The weather's been crazy. Hurricanes, snowstorms, cold snaps, windstorms. But silently in the background, we've got all these volcanoes going off. The Mayan volcano, right now they're evacuating people. This is a level 4 alert. It hasn't moved up to a 5 yet, but they are really thinking that this is going to be a major event. Now, if this does become a major event, and I read an article off of SPACEWEATHER.com, and they were talking about how the earthquake eruptions that we've had right now are puny compared to what happened in 1815 for the Tambora explosion, which was a major event, and it cooled the planet, I do believe, for 3 years. It was responsible for the cooling. So we're waiting for that big volcano eruption, and also not only are we waiting for that big volcano eruption, we're also waiting for that big earthquake. And a lot of folks are still worried about what happened out there in Alaska. There's still a lot of swarm of minor aftershocks. I think that with some of them were in the 30 3.0 range, 4.0, some 5s. But this is something that I think that we should become more active on as far as paying attention to, is these volcanoes. Because if you think it's busy now, wait until we get into this minimum. Wait till things start really ramping up. This is just the beginning. This uptick is minor compared to what's going to happen once we get full swing into this grand solar minimum. So, you know, and with that being said, the earthquakes, the uptick this week alone has jumped up. When Alaska had the 8.2, I know USGS says it got downgraded to a 7.9, which I think how they come up with that is they take the mean average of all the numbers that come in as a report, and they take that number that averages out. But the 8.2 earthquake, some folks are worried now as well with the uptick. And when we had that earthquake earlier this week, we were averaging, our 7-day average was like in the 368 earthquakes in a 7-day average. I checked that number today and it was at 520. So there has been a little bit uptick in earthquake activity, and more than likely the majority of that activity has come from the Alaska situation. So things are really starting to heat up right now as far as volcano eruptions. I've seen some amazing lava footage, stuff that you see in movies and cartoons. And some of these volcanoes that are waking up from their long sleep, the Condovor, is that the one? Kadovar, that was the one that hasn't erupted yet because it was underwater.
That was the one that was dormant, that's never gone off.
So there you go. You have a 300-year volcano going off now. And the Tambora, wasn't that the first time? It was dormant for 500 years, I believe. So, you know, some signs of what scientists have talked about, what's coming, are happening. The other day I wrote a little paper about, or a little blog about, is global cooling a debate anymore? And I guess I need to take myself out of my own shoes right now, because I write that because, especially with Mari, she is like she's like my audio book for research. Like whatever she reads it out loud. I suck it in as well. And so all the information that we are gathering right now with all the scientists and all the peer-reviewed papers and all the meteorological data and seismic data is all lining up with what happens during a grand solar minimum. And to me, when you talk about cosmic rays and this volcanic ash, these are two of the big factors in cooling. And the sun does drive the climate. Lots of scientists agree with that. I don't even, as a common sense, most people probably agree that the sun drives the climate, not CO2. In fact, right now we're seeing an example of how CO2 can cool the planet. Enough of these volcanoes have eruptions to put enough ash and cloud in the air, on top of the fact there are increased cloud coverage with cosmic rays, and then you add in lower TSI values as well, that those clouds will bounce any kind of warmth back out into space. Naturally, you're going to see a cooling effect. I'm excited to see the numbers on February 1st or 2nd about the temperature anomaly for the global part of it anyway. Last month, to my surprise, it rose. But I'd be surprised to see if it doesn't drop a little bit this month. So, also, I want to say this too, guys. Mari has found a new chart for TSI data, and it appears that it is slightly higher than the one that I've been reporting, which I knew there was two different ones, NASA and Source. And the Source is telling us that's at 1360. Now, this other data set for TSI is not arguing that we're at 1360. It's just slightly higher. Instead of 1360.7, this one's reading 1360 point, I think it was like one something. So, I'm sorry, 161.17.
It's right off our website. I linked to, if you want to try it. It should work. I just updated it.
It's under SPACEWEATHER?
Yeah, under TS. I just changed the link to the other one because I just think it's easier for people to read.
Well, and it was easier for me to read. And, you know, the other day we were trying to show everybody where to look up TSI data. And I know Mario was probably thinking there's got to be a better way to find TSI readings. And here you go, folks. They lay it out very well. I'm actually going to use this from now on. This starts at 1362.75. It bottoms out at 1359.75. So if we go along with this chart here, and this is, again, the TSI data does not come back real time, by the way. We're about 6 days behind. For instance, here's one from the 17th. I reported it was at a 1360.71. this source here will tell us that it was a 1361.1. So, I mean, we're talking about fine hairs here, guys. This is not like way off. This is not bad data. This, to me, just seems like it's a little bit easier. And if you saw, I can move my cursor. It'll move the date. It'll tell me the reading. But Mari and I were doing some research today, and we were going over what Casey had said in the interview. And the thing that we need to worry about, guys, look at this. From January of 2015, look at the TSI values. I mean, this to me is an obvious slope. You see the peak back here in 14, okay? When we get to 14, that's our peak. That's the end of the max. And now we start coming out of the maximum in 15. This is a clear downtrend. And if we get a downtrend in the TSI, that means we get less radiation, less warmth. So I don't understand what the confusion can possibly be when people see that our TSI numbers are actually trending lower and lower by the year. And the prediction, or not the prediction, but I guess the alarm button is when we start seeing averages of 1360 consistently. And right now we're not there, according to this chart. We got there in September. Well, we also had a very weird, and I want to say this, I remember this, if you look here, this says September 5th of 2017, which was right around our first major hurricane, and our TSI levels dropped like a rock, under 1360 for the first time since 2014. So, but I think from now on, we've got it in our links. I think this is the site that we were going to go ahead and show our TSI data from now on, because I think this is just really easy to read. Plus, it just, I mean, the graph spells it out for us. The sheet that I've been showing everybody on our solar updates were pretty hard to find the numbers. You have to decipher through a page full of nothing but numbers. So I think this is pretty much clear and right to the point. And Mari, thank you again for finding these wonderful sites and information that you find for me all the time. I appreciate it.
You are welcome, Jake.
All right, guys. Well, that's it for today's update. We'll continue to keep up to date with the weather around here. We'll watch the earthquakes and volcanoes like always. So if there's anything that will be of importance, of course, stay here at Grand Solar Minimum channel. We will come through with any breaking news or any updates that is of relevance. All right, guys, we'll talk soon.